Over the past few months, I've been thinking about more ways to expand talking about other live action and other Disney properties, where by recent videos, I've made it apparent how much I praise Pirates of the Caribbean and its biggest characters of Captain Jack Sparrow, Davy Jones, and Barbossa, all living on as great original pieces amidst the onset of other major franchises like Star Wars and Marvel that the company started leaning in heavily investing soon after. And whether you think that has been to a great success, of course financially but mixed critically in today's divisiveness, Pirates of the Caribbean just remains to be very special to why we love Disney films in regarding their own live action. The only major successful film franchise adapted from their own theme park ride that also remains to be a major classic that many Disney theme park fans and guests around the world thoroughly enjoy to this day. And who would have thought that a realm of nasty scallywags who plunder and pillage villages and drink till they're dead would appeal to the public both in terms of the ride or the movie itself? Or more importantly, why would Disney thought of actually doing any of this that was different than most of their brand image would have allowed at the time, dealing with such subject matter that most pirates are involved in, and the fact that this genre of films weren't even that successful at the time? Well, because the simple answer is, it was just fun. Fun to see a group of characters out of the norm searching for treasure and immortality that legends are made of, where those like Captain Jack Sparrow are designed to appeal to both sides of heroes and villains that most people tend to like either way, in the simple want of a pirate and a ship, which most tend to think about regarding the seas, and then expanding upon that world with groundbreaking special effects for its time, curses upon uncharted waters, and a crazy fun supporting cast ranging from big to small that makes it a truly theater-going experience. Despite what we think overall about the quality of the franchise and several other films, we still manage to have a good time with it because of the world it finds itself in and the story that is more of a plus. Of course, this didn't mean it was free from its own problems, which it glaringly had at times, especially the more recent movies, which I don't like as much. Looking at you, Dead Man Tell No Tales. But overall, because I grew up with it, having such fond memories with friends and family, I still think it's a treasure piece that I love today. And thus comes the makings of this video to remind us the beauty of Pirates of the Caribbean and why it worked, bringing Disney proof of doing something a little on the edge and succeeding quite well at doing so, demonstrating the key power that original ideas for films work even better than the ones you already did in a different medium. Talking of course about live action remakes, where yes, this also does mean talking about the later years of the franchise and that particular stupidity of their story and the direction of the characters, but also accepting a continued world that still persists in public popularity, looking at its worst and then comparing with its best. So in saying all of this, let us take a look at the progression from the first to the last in the best way a Disney fan enveloped in their worlds could ever be. Now of course, to briefly start things off, we have to note that the idea still does come from the fact of the ride itself, and looking on what we know about its impact. Something I won't spend too much time talking about because it does deserve its own separate video discussing that as much as any other Disney attraction or theme park that is in a world of its own. Made during the last years of Walt Disney's life, he sought out to create a new experience involving animatronics that other boat rides like Small World could produce, bringing people down into the realm of 17th and 18th century pirates, where the result became an awe-inspiring world through the boat ride of human-like figures of a wild kooky past that inhabited the waters so many moons ago, with songs like Yo Ho, A Pirate's Life of Me catching us in on the fun of its entire world, even if it does appear to be a little rambunctious to say the least. It's simple to understand by its characters and visuals, which eventually make for a great recipe of a movie if needed be. But then again, at the same time, the film industry for those films wasn't the case for the most part, when many of the pirate movies just failed to impress, losing money like in the case of Cutthroat Island that nobody just seemed interested in, unless we refer to the case of Disney that actually had something when their very first live action film was in fact Treasure Island in 1950, which had pirates, at the time when those movies existed more often, before they took a tumble when most studios and the public were interested in other genres of movies, where I really don't think they had the proper tools to tell such stories until recent times with effects that progressed. And how we look back on the ride itself presenting such a great idea to many writers of the first film who wanted to bring back that entire opportunity to the big screen with the story of a supernatural cursed crew seeking to undo their misfortunes. An opportunity described by director Gore Verbinski to dive into the ride's fun and scary tone that would make for a great tribute on screen. However, these ideas would not be without its own questions considering what we just talked about and how pirate movies were perceived at the time, thinking even this one would flop after its release. release, and the stigma of theme park movies that weren't such great successes for Disney either, like The Country Bears or Mission to Mars released in the early 2000s. Disney movies that flopped really hard that then CEO Michael Eisner wanted to shut down production of Pirates if that outcome were likely to follow until they saw what they were working on behind the scenes. Of course, only talking partly about this, since there were also other issues that the executives had, like Johnny Depp playing Jack Sparrow with the way he would, pondering over making this home video rather than theatrical, being too expensive, or just overtly referencing the ride itself. Many factors that thought it wouldn't be a good movie, but how it actually turned out to be great, and how bad others like Eisner were running Disney during their own last years. Because now we can finally begin our journey with The Curse of the Black Pearl being a movie that combined characters on a journey through order and chaos. How we find ourselves through the actual lens of the main heroes of Elizabeth Swann and Will Turner growing up in the Caribbean under Port Royal, whose lives are changed by the heinous nature of piracy, seeking cursed Aztec code and other treasures untold. What most people tend to forget to realize is when they look back upon the movies is how the pirates themselves were not the main characters in the first place, but what rather appears to be normal individuals dragged into it, similar to how the guests were in the ride itself, and how characters like Captain Jack Sparrow serves on the side as a balance between right and wrong of heroes and villains, whether you apply that to the Royal Navy or the mutinous crew led by Barbossa, where it just hinges on this dark mysterious persona that is hyped to epic proportions in the simple wants of a pirate reclaiming his own ship, and a crew wanted to undo a curse between a marriage that was predetermined in the course of events. More of the fact that they are supporting characters and they work really well in that regard because they have a different agenda. And the focus of Will and Elizabeth is perfect to set in that tone similar to its audience that traveled through that boat ride under the mysterious caves itself. This point is to demonstrate with their younger versions in the very beginning of the film that is tied into the pirates themselves being rescued by Elizabeth and the Royal Navy, seeing that Will has the cursed medallion, and then meeting them back up years later when Norrington, who was just promoted to Commodore, is getting ready to propose to Elizabeth, while Will is raised as his blacksmith, missing his father lost a long time ago. All the while, Jack is in the middle, just going through Port Royal, waltzing his way to steal a ship of the Royal Navy, the character whom we are just most intrigued by. The bigger focus on why his introduction is very important is to highlight the greater point of why people love pirates in the world itself. These scenes are filmed in real locations on islands like St. Vincent, appearing as Tortuga and Port Royal, that really invest you in the world when Jack shows off his amazing talents after rescuing Elizabeth going off on his own agenda, reminding you that he is a pirate and that he sets out for himself even though he does good actions. That you set the stage perfectly that describes what kind of a character, or more importantly, what a pirate is about, searching for something so simple yet so big, and then the technical ability that makes them so dangerous, being wanted men branded by society itself. This dual nature makes you love him even more despite having such opposing overall goals to society, because he frees himself to do what he wants. That is the message of what the Pirates brings, rather than our main hero acting to stop him as normal criminals. That should be noted, and how he gets defeated by the ultimate distraction after not playing fair to his standards. And then by nightfall, due to the medallion that Elizabeth carried from Will, we see the famed pirate crew descend upon Port Royal to take her to the ship. The entire sequence of events is just everything you hope for in movies like this. A crew of dastardly villains descending upon at night, and a Royal Navy helpless in the attack with the vindication of the apparent worst pirate that anyone could ever hear of, whom Will decides to ask for help when the others were too slow to even do so. The insane truth of how Jack Sparrow is the smartest character, with the escape sequence with Will pulling off impossible odds in the most improbable situations. Another great aspect of this story and the world itself is making people not what they seem. A smart person playing an idiot in most cases, or a fellow civil man who actually has the blood of a pirate. Perception being king of everything in this entire world. It is the purpose of stories like Pirates of the Caribbean to carry visual simplicity with inner complexity. If you search for the wants and needs of their characters, including the villains like Barbossa, whose goals is to seek life once again, learning of their undead curse, stealing Aztec gold, but now suffering under the punishment for their sin, and the pirate who seeks to gain his own ship back and revenge from that old crew, weave straight into the romance between two characters who begin to understand more about themselves. You could question that romance any way you like, but the main point is them to come to understand who they are. Like the attraction itself, The goal of the film is to showcase a world through a historical fantasy setting, making it feel real while also blended within the supernatural realm, which is pulled off well, demonstrated by CGI that holds up 20 years later. And that is also thanks to the way they shot the film in its own setting that showcased the points of the story, where in the night, the moon peaks high above the sky, the demons start to come out to play, compared to a day where a sailor works his plans into motion. Hence why you go along the main characters of the film become less of Elizabeth and Will and more of Jack and Hector, the characters created as opposing pirate viewpoints on how they get things done and the suffering that comes with it, because we understand them too now, only seeking simple pleasures in life, whether it be to feel anything that makes them feel alive. The whole point of piracy is the feeling of living life to its fullest and teaching others to value that as well, when Will is at odds with how elusive Jack could be and his own ultimate goals for his love life. The actual fact that his father was a pirate that served under Jack, which by all means still doesn't invalidate their own standing of any of this or the entire trilogy of films as the main heroes described by the directors, but how the adventure reflects on both of their own status, contrasting their lifestyle in Port Royal like Elizabeth wearing tight corsets, but then being free to let it all loose fighting pirates on the seven seas. I mean, like they say, take what you can, give nothing back. And we also have to keep reminding ourselves that the greatest quote to describe the entire franchise of pirates is Jack Sparrow's own monologue about being dishonest, honestly, where it is the truth about him being an honest pirate yet a dishonest dealer who most can actually get tricked into his slurred swagger, a drunken idiot who can be the best pirate you've ever seen that affirms how important it is to have him as a character, with legends that are made by actions rather than the words that they speak, that the only way things can be done is if we think like a pirate does, with what a man can do and with what a man can't do, even if the people surrounding him already know him well enough from their past, but how he knows them better since he can appeal to the ego, their interest picking them apart, setting off events to where they need to go. The strongest weapon in all of pirates is not in fact swords, guns, or ships, or whatever you think under that belt, and is actually instead more of the words of a drunken pirate. Every step of the way was influenced by how he schmoozed his way into situations, from the boat, from Will's help, the deal with Barbossa that led him towards his only major goal. Nothing he ever said was bad, leaning towards one side, as it served to benefit both them in the long run, but how, like all great characters in the film, it was really meant for only one plan and one plan only that was executed in the greatest way possible through impossible means and twists that others still couldn't expect in the final battle. In the visual piece of having pirates appear to gain the upper hand with the curse out in the open, but actually a trap nonetheless for them to be killed and captured like his former mate did, finally feeling something for the first time, but only feeling the sadness of death. The depth of pirates, rooted within the simplicity of swashbuckling, made it stand out to a level unlike anything most films had seen at the time, and was enough to satisfy audience to finally embrace characters like Will and Elizabeth for who they truly are as pirates as much as their own family past showed.
Perhaps on the rare occasion pursuing the right course demands an act of piracy. Piracy itself can be the right course.
The true experience of it all, discussed by Weatherby Swan about the best course of action, is more of the ability to properly express yourself. You fall in love with the idea of pirates because their world offers more opportunities to explore than any other short one-sided mind could ever see, and if you can't see that as much as any foe Jack faced, then you ultimately will lose that battle, and the battle that just begun with how successful it was, probably getting us a sequel as part of a new trilogy and a franchise. And while Dead Man's Chest started out more of mixed feelings critically about the movies themselves, it was more for us about the continuing theme of adventure that Jack and the other characters held, with more complexity introduced within its newer villains on the side of trade companies or the evil fish devil Davy Jones himself. And people still agreed with that despite the mixed opinions, being the first major Disney film to cross $1 billion at the time that was actually the third highest grossing film when it was released. It showed us a world that really loved it, and the special effects just even got better. Like, I know we just talked about the undead skeleton crew holding up 20 years later, but even more so when it came to characters like Davy Jones and his own mutated crew. And the reason something like this works so well to continue besides those facts is because of one major theme I mentioned in my Davy Jones and Jack Sparrow videos within the concept of immortality. The pirates who seek or have in some way life that is never ending in this world, as the love of the sea is too great to let go, and one they will have to grapple with time and time again, either running away from their problems or walking towards it. Again, focusing on the great Will story with its own father added, trying to free him while Jack tries to get out of his own debt he made with Jones, who corrupted his own purpose and tortured his own immortal soul. Reading most of the consensus about this film, I do agree that it does make some mistakes, toning Jack Sparrow a bit back from his original wit, but when you look at Expanding Pirates, this film does a good job of actually explaining being a part 1 film to a 2-part sequel for its time, with the new characters added on with an overall mission that threatens piracy, opening up more avenues to learn about its characters' past, which unfortunately did not happen later when they made a bigger mistake in the last film. But what's more important about this is that it understands that there is more than just Captain Jack Sparrow himself. Yes, many people today make the argument that there is no pirates without him, but reminding us yet again that others like Will and Elizabeth contribute to the real journey of growth that the films have, and the newer returning characters with their own agenda to add on to that. And why World's End is also one of my more favorite Pirates movies to cap that era off, with the plan to finally fight back against the likes of Cutler Beckett's menace and dive more into Davy Jones' literal broken heart, and more continuing with having Jack and Barbossa back to deal with their mortality and the world at large, feeling what it's like to lose a life. Of course, with other films like this, they say the problem that the film just had too many characters and had the incomprehensible plot threads, but then again, knowing the damn time we just passed now with superheroes, this was just better than originally thought. Yes, you have many interconnected stories working together to find its way back towards the final fight in this film, but it just worked itself out under one roof. It works because the entire idea of pirates, since the ride allows you to enter an entire world filled with a variety of characters. At least that's how I saw things, even if it's a relatively simple attraction that won't translate into a massive franchise. Looking at Haunted Mansion, for example, as a point that disproves what I just said, where it's just how you feel about the world that works in this very way, by having a crew battle against impossible odds, as it started out with Jack and now having his friends band together pulled against a difficult choice. That people love this trilogy because we are compelled to care about their entire journey, to learn what makes a pirate and why it is a life that feels so free. It's a film that reaffirms the journey some characters took, like Elizabeth becoming leaders as the Pirate King, rising up to the challenge, or Will temporarily betraying his friends for the freedom of his father, and then leading up to the moment where he finds himself wedged back into the heart of Davy Jones that Jack also contemplates in an immortal life, but gives up to truly give the wish back to him. The finale converges on all character points fighting for something they believe is worth living for, either giving up the hard truths for others and sacrificing in honor of the greater good. Not that piracy ever advocates for the greater good if we know what they do specifically, but compared to the alternative that enslaved nations upon nations under them, this is actually the good path. Just like how they say in the beginning of making these films, these really do work best since they use that historical fantasy setting, making it not hard to believe that a bunch of pirates could come together faced with such supernatural odds against a common enemy, in the great way that Disney would know how best to do. It just fits under the brand image because it extends who they are and allows them to go more darker, closing out the trilogy back with its old antics off for newer adventures that many fans would love to continue, but how most would consider that to be its high point before the franchise would have its major setbacks and fall to an abyss. Not that it tampered its success in the slightest, no, with another billion-dollar hit, but how the story just got more off track than usual. As with the case of finishing the Turner story, we mostly turned to using Barbossa and Jack as the main characters, continuing on for the search for the Fountain of Youth and the life quest we found in Dead Man's Chest. Where I would like to point out that this success I still personally enjoy on occasion was due to the great continued nature of the character of Jack Sparrow and the familiar nature that we were used to, that it still contributed to the central message integral to its own existence. Barbossa also has his own interesting character arc, wanting revenge for losing the pearl in the proper way a pirate does to survive. But how it doesn't matter when the ultimate movie fails to suffice for what most people want in Pirates, bringing up the worst problems of the other later films with some character decisions or plot inconveniences, like this damn priest or the mermaid arc, which had no real greater bearing or impact on the story or the franchise as a whole other than the surface view love story that made no sense and just moved towards one ultimately predictable goal. Compared to the others, the chaos was more manageable and it didn't feel like the world of Pirates was expanded on that much beyond the central island of the Fountain of Youth or the meeting with historical figures actually in Europe. Again, these are interesting concepts and ideas that I absolutely love personally, but still not strong enough to continue its path forward. However, I still advocate for it having Jack retain its own traits, which is ever so important if the franchise was ever to continue, which unfortunately did bring us the latest Dead Man Tell No Tales film as the worst they could offer and showed us that not all the best ideas can work all the time. The decline the franchise experienced in the era of increased Marvel and Star Wars presence that took a more laid-back approach to everything, where it seemed like a soft reboot with nothing of the original value. Yes, I can praise Barbossa's conclusive arc, but Jack on the other hand was the bitter joke that ruined everything that we know of in being a bumbling idiot throughout that happens to portray what the movies were. Of course, being Pirates, it was still a successful movie financially. Not a billion-dollar movie, but enough that people wanted to see more from the world because they still showed that they cared, with enticing moments to root for, but not in the best possible way. Yet how it could still work under better conditions than other franchise because of the entire lure of the seas. You start to notice how you play out the same romances and it just doesn't do much to thread the needle, half-baked to something you already did from before. Sure, it does better in terms of expanding the mythology back to something of the seas, but things just don't seem like you understand what makes this franchise so special, backseating some of the more important character traits because you think you are moving towards a new future. But there's only so much you could say before that era of piracy comes to an end, because what more can you actually say without sending him off to yet again and again towards that same horizon? It just becomes redundant at that point. But how yet, still looking back on the entire legacy, it still doesn't really change what we love about that really. We still look at the positives of Pirates overall because it's just so damn fun to do so. It is still rooted within the nature of its characters and its setting and its terrific action. But of course, looking at the state of media now, you can say that also for the predominant Disney live action franchises too in some way, but just not to the extent of what particularly these group of characters did, born out of a grounded view of a ride with tons of treasure to explore in the simplicity of the sea. Sometimes we take that for granted with how good that can be when we have yet to explore the rest of the oceans of the world too. That there is so much more to tell above and below the surface of the waters and the islands that carry such rich historical value. And if we keep looking back on its own characters in media with the name Pirates is brought up time and time again, we know that its legacy will surely last for generations to come, with the hope that its lasting template can bring us back to realize what was the better portion of live action for Disney in its past or its future. And with that all said, I'm all done. Time to drink up me hearties, yo ho.